Why is it that even when she's moved on, it feels like you're still somehow there? The truth is, the memory of you doesn't just fade away, it becomes a part of her growth. Today, we're diving into why your influence, whether you realize it or not, continues to shape her path. Your presence, your lessons, your impact all remain quietly driving her forward. It's not about holding on, it's about how she carries the pieces of who you were into her own transformation. Let's explore why the echoes of your connection can leave a lasting imprint, one that will linger with her long after the relationship has ended. The echo of your absence. Number one, the echo of your absence. You know that feeling when someone walks out of your life and their absence fills up the entire room? That's what happens when you step back without chasing or explaining. A stoic man knows that the real power lies not in staying visible, but in knowing when to disappear. When you leave without a word, your absence becomes a haunting echo in her mind. The key here is intentionality. You're not punishing her, you're giving her the space to reflect and grow. But growth rarely feels like sunshine. It feels like discomfort, like being haunted by a silence that says more than words ever could. She might try to convince herself that you didn't matter as much as you did. She might fill her days with distractions, try to laugh louder, move faster, but none of it can drown out the quiet presence you left behind. You see, a man who walks away with clarity and calm doesn't fade. He lingers not like a ghost, but like a mirror. One that reflects what she overlooked, what she didn't nurture, and what she now can't reclaim. You didn't storm out. You didn't explain your worth. You didn't beg for understanding. You simply stepped back with self-respect and let the silence speak for itself. That kind of exit leaves a different kind of impression, one that lives in the spaces she used to feel safe in. Now, every time she grows, she's reminded of what had to be lost in the process. And sometimes that loss looks a lot like you. She may post pictures, go out more, chase new experiences, surround herself with people who clap for her every step, but none of them will feel as stable, as grounded, or as rare as you. Because what haunts her growth isn't just your absence, it's the unshakable realization that a man like you loved her and then let her go without making a scene. And no matter how far she runs or how much she pretends to have moved on, that truth will follow her. Not as a burden, but as a lesson, one she'll carry in every quiet moment. One she'll feel every time she meets someone new and secretly compares him to the man who didn't need to chase her to be remembered. That's the echo you leave behind, and it's louder than any goodbye. Number two, unwritten conversations. Unwritten conversations. Sometimes it's not the words we say, but the words we don't. Have you ever found yourself reflecting on a conversation that never happened? That silence between two people that was never broken, the apology never offered, the feelings never confessed, the goodbye never spoken. That's the kind of silence that haunts. Because when there are no final words, the mind becomes obsessed with what might have been said. When you walk away without a dramatic exit, without a bitter last text or emotional closure, you leave a powerful imprint. She might not understand it at first. She might think you're cold or distant. But over time, the silence starts to speak for you. It becomes a mirror that forces her to look inward. You see, a stoic man knows that silence isn't a lack of courage. It's the highest form of emotional control. He doesn't owe explanations to those who didn't value his presence. And in his silence, he teaches a lesson. Not everything broken has to be fixed. Not every goodbye has to be loud. Stoicism teaches us to master our emotions, not suppress them, but to choose when and where they deserve expression. When you let silence carry your message, you're not disappearing. You're preserving your dignity. And that ironically speaks louder than any long-winded farewell. You're not punishing her. You're allowing the consequences of her actions to echo back at her without interference. That's what makes it unforgettable. Over time, she'll try to grow. She might move into new relationships, chase new dreams, fill her days with distractions. But growth requires clarity. And how can she fully move forward when the memory of you still lingers like a story without an ending? She'll hear your name in passing, see something that reminds her of you, and suddenly feel the weight of everything that was left unsaid because you didn't scream. You didn't beg, you simply stepped back with composure. And now that emotional restraint, so rare in today's world, becomes the very thing she can't forget. This is where your power lies in your ability to walk away. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your peace to argue for your worth. Your silence doesn't mean you vanished. It means you evolved. And as she looks back, she won't just miss your presence. She'll feel the depth of your absence. She'll remember what it felt like to be around a man who didn't need noise to be remembered. And that, my friend, is where the shift begins. Not in a grand gesture, but in quiet strength. If this part of the message speaks to you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever been remembered more for your silence than your words? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, or simply type power in stillness if you've ever chosen calm over chaos. And if this resonates with your journey, don't forget to like the video. It helps us grow this stoic-minded community. Now let's keep going because the next insight reveals what truly lingers when the noise fades. Number 3, the weight of unfinished. The weight of unfinished stories. When you leave without a final chapter, she's left with an unfinished story. The things that could have been, the possibilities, all hang in the air and they don't fade quickly. They linger, replaying in the background of her growth like a song that never quite resolves. This is the kind of silence that doesn't just echo, it weighs on her. Every time she thinks she's moved on, a memory sneaks back in. Not because she still wants the relationship, but because the story never reached a clean conclusion. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A stoic man doesn't crave closure because he understands that closure is just a construct of the ego, a need to feel in control of what was never fully his to begin with. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Time is like a river made up of events which happen and a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place." A Stoic accepts this flow. He doesn't chase the ending. He becomes the man who can walk away. Not with resentment, but with quiet clarity. And yet, in that quiet departure, he leaves behind a kind of ghost. Not one that haunts out of bitterness, but one that lingers in her memory because it was never fully understood. She'll scroll through old pictures, hear your name in passing, see a man in a crowd who walks like you, and for a moment, just a flicker. She'll feel something unresolved tug at her chest. It's not regret. It's the absence of a final word. That's the power of the unwritten chapter. It becomes a mirror for her growth, and as she tries to move forward, that lingering question, what if, can slow her down? It won't always be visible. She might post, smile, travel, even fall for someone new. But deep down, a part of her story still belongs to a man who chose peace over performance, depth over drama, and self-respect over re-explaining his worth. So, if you've ever wondered whether your silence mattered, remember this. It's not always the loud goodbyes that leave the deepest impression. Sometimes it's the ones who walk away mid-sentence calmly and without malice, who stay with us the longest because she wasn't ready for the end, but you were. And that difference, that's what haunts her growth. Number 4, the power of emotional. The power of emotional detachment. Now let's talk about emotional detachment. Sounds harsh, right? But it's not. Detachment, when done with respect, is one of the most powerful tools you can wield. A Stoic man chooses detachment because it allows him to preserve his peace and integrity. When you let go emotionally, not out of spite, but as a way to protect your inner world, you force her to look within herself and figure things out. And that, my friends, is where growth happens. But here's the twist. Your emotional detachment doesn't just push her toward growth. It lingers. It haunts her in quiet, private moments. Because deep down, she remembers how you didn't beg. You didn't chase. You didn't explode. You simply let go. That kind of response, it stays in a woman's mind far longer than any long paragraph or emotional outburst ever could. Your absence combined with your calm detachment becomes a mirror she can't look away from. Let me give you a real example. Maybe she was used to men arguing, pleading, or trying to win her back. But when you walked away, not with resentment, but with dignity, she didn't know how to react. She kept waiting for the message that never came, for the door you never reopened. That silence was louder than words. And every time she faces a new situation or a new man, she'll compare it to your stillness, your control, your presence that no longer needs to prove anything. From a Stoic lens, this is about mastery over the self. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and detachment done right is the path to that freedom." You're not avoiding emotion. You're choosing not to be enslaved by it, and in doing so, you become unforgettable. She may move forward, she may even try to grow, but the memory of a man who loved her and let her go without breaking himself, that memory becomes a quiet echo in her growth. One that whispers, "He didn't lose me. I lost him." And that, my friend, is the kind of presence that doesn't fade. It transforms into a haunting reminder that not all endings come with noise. Some come with power. So now I want you to pause for a second and really sit with this. What does it say about a man when his silence speaks louder than his presence ever did? That's not just emotional strength, it's inner mastery. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means you've reached a level of self-respect where you no longer beg to be understood. And that leaves an impression no one forgets. Have you ever experienced a moment where your absence had more impact than your words ever could? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments, or if this resonated with you, just type "my distance had an impact." Now let's move into the next layer of this because her memory of you doesn't just echo, it shapes her. The perception of lost control. Number 5, the perception of lost control. Here's the thing. Control is often an illusion. When you step away from constantly feeding her validation, she'll realize she's no longer in control, and that can be disorienting. But from a Stoic perspective, real freedom comes from relinquishing control over others and even over yourself. When you let go, not only do you liberate yourself, but you also give her the space to grow stronger in her independence. Still, that space you create isn't just some neutral distance. It becomes a subtle, powerful shift in energy. Because let's be honest, when she was used to you being there, always available, always responding, always making her feel like she had the upper hand, she built a comfort zone around your presence. Your attention became a constant. Your emotional availability became a resource she could access. But when you withdrew calmly without resentment, that balance was disturbed. And whether she admits it or not, she feels that shift deeply. Here's where it gets interesting. The memory of you doesn't just fade into the background, it becomes a checkpoint in her emotional journey. Maybe she thought she could replace you quickly. Maybe she tried to distract herself. But Stoicism reminds us that true impressions are carved not by noise but by stillness. When you remain composed and intentional in your absence, you don't just leave, you imprint. Your silence becomes a mirror she has to face. And in that silence, she starts asking questions that have no easy answers. She might still grow. She might still move forward, but it won't be clean. Because your memory won't just be about what you gave her, it'll be about what she couldn't keep. About the man who didn't beg to be understood. The man who walked away not because he lacked emotion, but because he had mastered it. A Stoic man doesn't need to win arguments or prove his worth. He lives with intention. He values peace over chaos, and he lets go when his soul is no longer nourished. Think about this. You used to be her anchor even if she never said it out loud. And now, when the storms come, she has to steady herself, and she will. But she'll do it while remembering that at one point, you were the calm in the chaos. You were the man who didn't flinch when she tested your patience, who didn't break when she pushed. And when you finally stepped back, you didn't burn bridges. You just stopped lighting the way. That kind of departure haunts. Not because of drama, but because of clarity. because she can't label you as the villain. She can't paint you as the one who lost control. She has to sit with the truth that you simply outgrew the chaos. And in every new relationship she tries to build, there will be moments, quiet ones, where she compares. Not because she wants to, but because your presence left a blueprint. Your silence carried standards. And if those standards aren't met again, her memory of you will linger, quietly reminding her that she once had something rare and didn't know how to hold on to it. That's the essence of Stoic detachment. You don't leave to hurt, you leave to honor your peace. But in doing so, you become the standard by which everything after you is measured. That's why her memory of you will haunt her growth. Not as a ghost of pain, but as a silent reminder of what real presence, calm strength, and emotional discipline feel like. Number 6, her journey of self-discovery. Here's where it gets real. Your absence doesn't just leave a void, it triggers a journey of self-discovery. But don't confuse this journey with instant healing or empowerment. No, it's rarely a clean break. It's messy, quiet, and often filled with late nights staring at the ceiling, wondering why your presence lingers even after you're gone. When you step away, intentionally, not emotionally charged, but grounded and composed, you don't just disappear, you leave a silent pressure behind. And that pressure forces her inward. She begins to ask herself questions she didn't have to face before. Why did he stop trying? Why did his energy feel so stable? And why do I feel unbalanced now? These aren't just fleeting thoughts. These are the sparks of transformation. When a woman loses a man who was emotionally sovereign, who didn't beg, who didn't lash out, who simply withdrew with self-respect intact, she's left to wrestle with more than just loss. She has to examine her own patterns. The parts of her that took your presence for granted, the pieces that craved control, validation, or attention without reciprocating depth. From a Stoic lens, this is the highest form of release. You didn't collapse under emotion. You practiced detachment with purpose. You didn't leave in rage, you left in alignment with your values. Epictetus once said, "We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about them." And she'll come to judge your absence not as abandonment, but as a lesson, one that keeps echoing. Imagine her trying to grow, to evolve, to become her best self. She'll read the books, hit the gym, maybe even speak to friends or a therapist. On the outside, it might look like she's thriving, but on the inside, there's a lingering standard that no one else seems to meet. A quiet benchmark etched by your emotional presence, your discipline, your restraint. And even if she never says it aloud, it's there. You became part of her growth story, not as the villain, not as the savior, but as the moment everything shifted. That's the haunting part. Her memory of you doesn't block her growth. It follows it. Every step forward carries the faint imprint of your influence. She might try to brush it off, convince herself it was just a phase, but deep down she knows you weren't just another chapter. You were the turning point. And that realization, it doesn't fade. It matures with her. So when you walk away, not to punish, but to protect your peace. Remember this, growth often begins where comfort ends. And your silence, that wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of hers, a story in which your memory plays a quiet but unshakable role. The mirror of her past, number 7, the mirror of her past. Your memory will be like a mirror for her. The choices she makes, the actions she takes, will be subconsciously influenced by your absence. It's not about control, it's about influence. A Stoic man doesn't try to force change on others. Instead, his consistent behavior, his integrity, his strength in absence becomes a silent teacher for those around him. Let me put it this way. Imagine she's walking through her new experiences, trying to grow, to explore, to move on. But every time she faces a decision, whether it's about who to trust, how to be treated, or what she truly wants, there you are. Not in the physical sense, but as a mental imprint, a memory, a standard. Because the way you carried yourself, especially in how you exited, left a mark. You didn't beg, you didn't break down, You didn't turn cold and bitter. You simply stepped back with grace. And that changes everything. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And that's exactly what you did. You didn't try to convince her to value you. You lived in a way that made your presence unforgettable. And when a woman remembers a man who held his boundaries, loved without losing himself, and walked away without drama, that memory becomes part of her internal reflection. It haunts her, not in a negative, tormenting way, but as a reminder of what real strength, calm, and emotional maturity looked like. So don't be surprised if down the line she compares others to you. Not because you're perfect, but because you stood firm in a world that often rewards emotional chaos. Your memory will echo in moments she least expects, when she's mistreated and thinks, he never would have done that, or when she's unsure of herself and remembers how safe and grounded she felt around you. Her growth won't be linear, and your memory will both challenge and guide her. That's the quiet power of a man who chooses inner peace over external validation. You don't chase, you don't explain. You become a mirror she has to face. And whether she likes it or not, that reflection will shape the woman she becomes. Take a second to reflect. What kind of mirror are you leaving behind? Not with words, but with presence, discipline, and calm. That's the quiet power of a Stoic man. Before we move on, drop a comment if this spoke to you or just type, "I choose to be the mirror." Let's keep the conversation going. The regret she can't undo, number 8. The regret she can't undo. Regret in this context isn't just about wishing things were different. It's about realizing the value you had and how she may never get that back. It hits differently when she starts to understand that what she walked away from wasn't just comfort. It was rare. You weren't loud about your worth. You didn't beg to be seen. You simply were steady, calm, and present. That's what makes it haunting, because now she has to carry the weight of that memory into every future connection. And no matter how much she tries to distract herself, that lingering thought remains. What if he was the one who truly saw me? You see, a Stoic man doesn't chase apologies or explanations. He doesn't wait for someone to come around and recognize his worth. As Marcus Aurelius put it, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In other words, your peace, your progress, your ability to detach with dignity, that becomes the very thing she remembers. Not because you intended it, but because you became unforgettable by being real in a world full of noise. Imagine this. She's in a new situation, maybe talking to someone new, but something feels off. Not because that person did anything wrong, but because they don't feel like you. They don't carry that calm presence. They don't respond with the same grounded energy. And that gap, that subtle difference, is where the regret blooms. It's quiet, but powerful. It's not dramatic, but it stays with her. And this is where growth often begins. Not in comfort, but in contrast. When life puts her in front of something that doesn't compare, she's forced to grow. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. She'll have to wrestle with her own choices, confront her ego, and ask herself why she let go of something so steady. Your memory doesn't disappear. It becomes the benchmark. The inner standard she didn't know she had until you were gone. That's the haunting part. It's not that you wish her pain. It's that your absence reveals her deeper truths, and once revealed, they cannot be ignored. Number 9, the resilience built from loss. Loss is a teacher, one we often. The resilience built from loss try to avoid, but it's always present in our lives. When you step away, you allow her to confront loss head on. And with that confrontation comes resilience. A Stoic man knows that every setback, every emotional loss is an opportunity to grow. Through your absence, she may discover strengths she didn't know she had, but here's where it ties deeply to her growth and why your memory will linger. It's not just about missing you, it's about what your presence represented. Stability, patience, maybe even the version of herself she was becoming when she was around you. And when that disappears, the internal struggle begins. She might try to distract herself, jump into something new, or pretend like your departure didn't matter. But the echo of your calm presence, your disciplined silence, your non-reactivity that stays because you weren't just another man. You became a mirror, one she's now left staring into alone. Imagine this. She's trying to move forward to become someone new, yet every step forward reminds her of the version of herself she hasn't yet healed. That's the paradox. Your absence isn't just a loss, it's a silent benchmark. And every man who follows every situation she faces will be subconsciously compared to the way you handled yourself with stoic clarity and emotional self-control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In her case, the pain of losing you becomes the way. It becomes the very friction that forces her to grow. But that growth isn't painless. It's haunted by flashes of what once was. Your emotional restraint, your ability to let go without explanation, your strength in not needing closure. So yes, she may become stronger. She might rebuild herself in time. But part of that strength will be forged in the shadow of what she lost you. And that memory, that comparison, that growth built from the silence you left behind will always carry your imprint. Let me ask you, have you ever become stronger because someone left? Then you already know. Her memory of you won't just fade, it will become the fuel for her transformation. But in that fire, she'll always feel the echo of the man who walked away with dignity. Number 10, the unfading influence. The unfading influence. Even when time passes, your influence will remain. It's not about holding on to the past, it's about leaving behind something lasting. Think about it. When a man walks away with clarity, without resentment, and with a calm purpose, he doesn't just leave a memory, he leaves a mark. A stoic man doesn't need to chase validation or cling to the idea of being remembered. He simply lives by his values, and that alone becomes unforgettable. She might go on with her life, meet new people, chase new experiences, but every now and then something will trigger a memory, a song, a smell, a quiet evening. And there you are in her thoughts. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence was rooted in stillness, in intention. That kind of presence lingers far longer than any dramatic goodbye or passionate argument ever could. A man who lives with virtue and who doesn't react out of ego, but responds with discipline, becomes a reference point in a woman's emotional journey. She may not admit it. She may even try to dismiss it. But deep down, she'll know the truth. That you brought something to her life that wasn't easy to replace. Maybe it was your consistency. Maybe it was the way you didn't beg to be understood, but simply stood firm in who you were. That influence becomes part of the soil from which her growth emerges. And sometimes it's a haunting one because as she tries to move forward, she's carrying the silent weight of someone who didn't just pass through, but left meaning in his wake. That's the paradox of your impact. You let go, but she can't fully escape the echo. And that's why we don't chase. We don't beg. We don't try to be remembered. We simply live well by our own code. As Epictetus once taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Let your actions echo, not your words. Let your memory work in silence. Because what's done with strength and stillness never fades. It just becomes part of her inner landscape. So ask yourself, brother, what kind of memory are you leaving behind? Let me know in the comments because sometimes what we leave behind says more about who we are than what we hold on to. So now you see your silence wasn't an ending. It was a conclusion beginning. Not just for her, but for you. Because while she's learning, growing, and grappling with the echoes of what you represented, you have already moved forward calmly, quietly, powerfully. And that's the paradox of true strength. It doesn't need to be loud to leave a lasting impression. Her memory of you will haunt her growth, not because you wished her pain, but because your presence carried meaning and your absence demanded reflection. You didn't walk away to be missed. You walked away to stay whole. If this resonated with you, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What part of this message hit the deepest for you? And if you found value here, don't forget to like the video, share it with a brother who needs to hear this, and check out the next video on screen. Each one builds on this journey of discipline, presence, and becoming the man no one forgets. I'll see you in the next one. Stay grounded, stay stoic,